Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I was scrolling through Tinder one night, aimlessly swiping left and right when I saw her. Her name was Mia, and she had this captivating smile that lit up her profile. She looked like she just stepped out of a music video, with long wavy hair and a playful glint in her eyes. I sent her a quick message, and to my surprise, she replied almost instantly. We started chatting, and it felt so easy, like we'd known each other forever. She was funny, quirky, and had this mysterious vibe that I couldn't quite put my finger on. After a few days of texting and sharing memes, we decided to meet up. Mia suggested a local coffee shop that was known for its creepy, old-school vibe. Apparently, it used to be a speakeasy back in the Prohibition era. I thought it was kind of cool, so I agreed. We set a date for Friday evening. The day of our date rolled around, and I was a bundle of nerves. I picked out my favorite flannel shirt, threw on some jeans, and tried to play it cool. I arrived at the coffee shop, and as soon as I walked in, the atmosphere hit me. The place was dimly lit, with old wooden beams and vintage decor that made it feel like stepping back in time. It was cozy, but had an eerie edge to it, like you could almost hear whispers from the past. I spotted Mia sitting at a corner table, her head bent over her phone. She looked up as I approached, and her face broke into that captivating smile. The conversation flowed easily at first. We laughed over coffee, shared stories about our lives, and even talked about our favorite horror movies. But there was something about Mia that felt off. She would occasionally glance around the room, her smile fading for just a moment, as if she was expecting someone or something. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just a bit anxious about meeting someone new. As we finished our drinks, she suggested we take a walk around the neighborhood. It was getting late, and the streets were mostly empty, but I didn't want to sound like a coward. We strolled through the dimly lit streets, the atmosphere growing heavier with each step. Something about the shadows felt alive, like they were watching us. I kept glancing at Mia, who seemed to be lost in thought, her eyes darting from one shadow to the next. We turned down a side street where the lights flickered ominously. That's when I noticed the figure standing at the end of the block. He was just a silhouette, but something about him sent chills down my spine. Mia didn't seem to notice. She was talking about her favorite band, her voice cheerful and carefree. I tried to focus on her words, but my eyes kept drifting back to the figure. He was just standing there, unmoving, but I felt like he was watching us. Suddenly, Mia stopped. She turned to me with an intense look in her eyes, and I could see the fear creeping in. She said she needed to go home, and I could tell she was genuinely scared. I offered to walk her back, thinking it would ease her nerves. We hurried down the street, and I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on us. The figure was still there, just a little closer now, and my heart raced. As we reached her apartment complex, Mia stopped at the entrance and turned to me. She looked pale, her smile replaced with a frown. She said she had fun but needed to go inside. I could sense something was off, so I asked if she was okay. She hesitated, glancing back over her shoulder, and then said she just had a weird feeling. I thought it was just nerves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As she stepped inside, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then I heard a noise. It was a low, guttural sound that seemed to echo from the shadows. I turned, and that's when I saw him again, the figure from earlier, now standing just a few feet away. My heart dropped, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. He was closer than before, and I could see his features. He was wearing a dark hoodie, and his face was partially obscured, but his eyes were piercing and fixated on me. I started to back away, my instinct screaming at me to run. That's when I heard Mia's voice from inside the building, calling my name. I looked back, and she was standing at her door, looking worried. I turned to face the figure again, but he was gone, just vanished into thin air like he had never been there. My heart raced as I glanced back at Mia. She looked confused, and I knew I had to get out of there. I told her I needed to go and hurried away, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I got back to my car and locked the doors, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. I just wanted to go home and forget the whole night. But as I drove away, I couldn't help but feel like I was being followed. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see that figure behind me. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about Mia. I wanted to text her to make sure she was okay, but something held me back. I felt like I had stepped into a horror movie, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a part of it anymore. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia, and my heart raced as I opened it. She said she was sorry about last night, and that she had a weird feeling about someone watching her for weeks. She said she thought maybe she was just being paranoid, but when I showed up, it felt like everything clicked. I felt a cold wave wash over me as I read those words. I asked her if she was safe, and she replied that she was fine but didn't want to talk about it anymore. As days passed, I kept receiving messages from her, but they became more erratic. She would send me random song lyrics or strange memes that didn't make sense. I felt like she was slipping away, and I couldn't do anything about it. Then one night, I received a message that made my stomach drop. She said she had seen the figure again. He was outside her apartment, watching her. My heart raced as I read those words. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I didn't know what to do. I told her to call the police, but she said she couldn't. She was too scared. I could feel my own fear rising, and I started to panic. I tried to convince her to come stay with me, but she said she couldn't leave her apartment. I knew I had to do something, so I drove over to her place, my heart pounding the entire way. When I arrived, the street was eerily quiet, and the air felt heavy. I parked, my palms sweaty as I approached her building. I knocked on her door, calling her name, but there was no answer. Panic surged through me as I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I glanced around, looking for any sign of danger. That's when I saw him again. The figure was standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadows. My body froze, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to run, but I couldn't leave Mia. I banged on the door harder, my voice rising in desperation. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, and I turned to see the figure moving closer. I felt a surge of adrenaline and bolted back to my car, fumbling for my keys. As I got in and slammed the door, I could see him now, his face illuminated by the streetlight. He looked familiar, and then it hit me. He was the same guy I had seen on Mia's profile picture. Panic surged through me as I realized that I had been talking to someone who was possibly in danger, and I was too late. I sped away from the building, my heart racing. I couldn't believe what just happened. It felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, and my stomach dropped. The figure was running after me, his face twisted into a terrifying expression I'd never forget. I didn't stop driving until I was home, locked inside my apartment. I texted Mia one last time, desperate to know if she was okay, but no response came. I fell into a restless sleep that night, my mind haunted by the events of that evening and the figure that seemed to have stepped right out of my worst nightmares. And even now, weeks later, every time I hear a noise outside my window, I always thought dating apps were a joke, but one night, boredom got the best of me. I was scrolling through Tinder, half-heartedly swiping left, and right while my friends were busy laughing at some terrible movie, I stumbled across this profile. His name was Jake, and he had this goofy smile that seemed a little too wide. But there was something about him. He looked like he didn't take life too seriously, and that was refreshing. We matched, and our conversation took off. He was funny, charming, and captivating in a way that was hard to pin down. After just a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up in person. He suggested a local diner that had a vintage vibe, something straight out of a classic movie. I agreed, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. The night of our date, I dressed up a bit, wanting to look cute but not like I was trying too hard. The diner was cozy, lit with neon signs, and filled with the smell of fries and burgers. When I walked in, I spotted him right away. He was sitting in a booth, looking around as if he was searching for something. The moment our eyes met, he smiled that same goofy smile, and I felt a rush of warmth. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about everything: our favorite movies, music, childhood stories. It felt comfortable, almost too comfortable, but there was something lurking beneath the surface. Jake kept glancing toward the entrance, as if he was waiting for someone. I brushed it off as nerves, or maybe just a quirk of his. After a while, I noticed the diner was getting emptier. It was late, and the waitress was cleaning up. I suggested that maybe we should call it a night, but Jake insisted on taking a walk. He said he knew a cool spot nearby, and I figured why not? It was a nice night, and I was feeling brave. We walked to a nearby park, which was mostly deserted except for the occasional rustle of leaves. Jake led the way, pointing out random things like he was giving me a tour of his world. But as we walked deeper into the park, I began to feel a little uneasy. It was quiet, too quiet. The laughter from the diner felt like a distant memory. Then, out of nowhere, Jake stopped and turned to face me. He had this intense look in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. He asked me if I believed in spirits, and I laughed it off. I thought he was just trying to be mysterious for effect. But he wasn't joking. He started telling me this wild story about how the park was haunted. Apparently, there were tales of a woman who had disappeared under strange circumstances years ago. He said people claimed to see her wandering around, looking for something she'd lost. I thought he was being ridiculous, but as he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just telling a story to impress me. His eyes were serious, and there was an edge to his voice that made my heart race. I wanted to laugh it off, joke about how scary stories were meant for campfires, but the air felt heavy, and the shadows around us seemed to stretch longer than they should. We continued walking, but I could feel the tension in the air. Suddenly, Jake stopped again, this time more abruptly. He pointed to a bench under a massive oak tree. He said it was where the woman was last seen. I laughed nervously and tried to deflect, but he was fixated on that bench. I felt like he was pulling me into some weird game I didn't want to play. Before I knew it, he was walking toward the bench, and I had no choice but to follow. He sat down, patting the spot next to him. I hesitated, looking around as if I might find an escape route. The park felt dark, and I was starting to regret agreeing to this whole thing. But against my better judgment, I sat down. Jake started talking again, but this time his tone was different. It was almost hypnotic. He leaned closer, and I could see the glint of something in his eyes that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. He spoke about the woman as if he knew her personally, detailing her life, her fears, and her regrets. It was strangely intimate, and I felt like I was being drawn into a story that wasn't mine. Then, without warning, he abruptly stopped talking. The silence stretched between us, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. That's when I noticed it, a figure in the distance, standing still among the trees. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to make out what I was seeing. Jake, still fixated on me, didn't seem to notice the figure. I felt a wave of panic wash over me, and I tried to make an excuse to leave. But he reached out, grabbing my wrist with a grip that felt too tight. It was something primal in his gaze, and I felt trapped in that moment. I wanted to scream, to pull away, but something held me there. The figure moved slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something pale and ethereal. It was a woman, her hair long and disheveled, her clothes tattered. I blinked, and she was gone. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the fear was real. Jake seemed to sense my unease. He leaned closer again, whispering about how the woman was looking for something she could never find. The way he said it made my skin crawl. It felt like he was trying to pull me into a reality I wasn't ready to accept. I needed to get out of there. I mustered all my courage, pulling my wrist free from his grip. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I told him I needed to go, but he just smiled that creepy smile and stood up too. The shadows around us felt thicker now, and I could hear the rustling leaves like whispers in the dark. I turned to leave, walking quickly toward the park exit. I could feel him right behind me, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to keep a steady pace, not wanting to give him any reason to think I was afraid. Just as I reached the edge of the park, I glanced back. Jake was standing by that bench, watching me with an expression that sent chills down my spine. The figure was gone, but the weight of the moment lingered like a dark cloud. I didn't look back again as I hurried to my car, fumbling with my keys as I tried to unlock the door. Once inside, I locked the doors and took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with him, that maybe he was more than just a guy looking for a date. I drove home, every shadow on the road feeling like it was watching me, waiting for the right moment to pounce. The next day, I uninstalled Tinder and promised myself I'd never go back. I didn't want to think about Jake or the stories he told. I just wanted to forget. But the memory of that night lingered, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we let into our lives without a second thought. I was on Tinder one night, just looking for a distraction from the usual grind of college life. My friends were out partying, but I was stuck in my tiny dorm room, nursing a mountain of assignments. Swiping left and right, I came across a profile that caught my eye. The girl had this wild hair, a few piercings, and a smile that seemed to promise adventure. Her bio was intriguing, hinting at a love for the paranormal and a penchant for exploring abandoned places. Honestly, it seemed a little cliché, but I was curious. We matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed surprisingly well. She told me about her last ghost hunting trip and how she loved the adrenaline of being in places where others were too scared to go. As someone who's never really been into the spooky stuff, I found it fascinating. It felt like I was talking to someone from a completely different world, and I was hooked. We made plans to meet up, and she suggested this old, supposedly haunted house on the outskirts of town. It was known for its creepy history, complete with tales of unexplained noises and sightings. I couldn't resist. The day of our meetup, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I told my roommate where I was going, and he gave me a look that said, "You're going to get yourself killed." It was just an old house, right? Nothing to worry about. I grabbed my jacket, checked the directions on my phone, and headed out. When I arrived, the sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty, looking like a giant with hollow eyes. I could feel the chill in the air, but I brushed it off as just the evening breeze. I was early, and I stood there fidgeting, half excited and half terrified. I wondered if she would show. A few minutes later, she pulled up in an old car that looked like it had seen better days. She got out, waving enthusiastically, and I felt my nerves ease. We chatted casually as we made our way toward the house. She told me stories of other haunted places she'd been to, and her enthusiasm was infectious. As we reached the front door, she paused, glancing back at me. There was a spark in her eye that said she was more excited than scared. I tried to match her energy, but as I stepped inside, the air felt heavier, like the house was breathing with a life of its own. The foyer was dark, with peeling wallpaper and a staircase that looked like it might collapse if you even looked at it wrong. We switched on our phone flashlights and started exploring. Each room told a story of neglect, old furniture covered in dust, broken windows, and the faint smell of mildew. The atmosphere was thick with mystery. I was trying to shake off the unease creeping in, but every creak of the floorboards sent a shiver down my spine. She led me into the living room, where she claimed people had reported seeing shadows flit by the windows. I laughed it off, trying to keep the mood light. As we moved deeper into the house, I started to feel a strange sensation, like we were being watched. It was probably just my imagination, but the feeling was hard to shake. We took turns sharing ghost stories. She had a ton, and I was genuinely impressed. But soon, I felt an overwhelming urge to leave. I didn't want to ruin the night, so I kept it to myself. She suggested we head upstairs, and I reluctantly agreed. The stairs creaked under our weight, and the darkness seemed to close in around us. At the top, we found ourselves in a long hallway, with doors on either side. She opened one, revealing a bedroom that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The bed was still made, the sheets yellowed with age, and an old mirror hung crooked on the wall. As I stepped inside, I felt a cold rush of air, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure in the mirror behind us. I blinked and it was gone. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light. But as we moved to the next room, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt electric, and a low hum began to resonate in the back of my mind. I glanced at her, and she looked just as uneasy. We were standing in what appeared to be a child's room, with faded wallpaper and a broken toy on the floor. The energy was different here, almost oppressive. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, and she stepped out into the hallway to check it. I stood there, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over me. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. As I waited, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The door to the room slowly creaked open wider, even though I was pretty sure I had shut it. My heart raced, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. When she returned, her face was pale. She said she had received a message from a friend about something strange going on at the house. We both stood there, the feeling of dread intensifying. I suggested we head back downstairs, but as we turned to leave, we heard a loud bang from the other side of the house. We froze, the air thick with tension. I glanced at her, and for the first time, I could see fear etched on her face. It wasn't just me feeling it anymore. We took a step toward the sound, curiosity battling with our instincts to run. As we approached the source, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. We reached a door at the end of the hallway, and I could see it was slightly ajar. The noise sounded like something scraping against the floor, a slow, deliberate sound that made the pit of my stomach drop. She pushed the door open, and we both peered inside. The room was dark, but I could make out the outline of something in the corner. It looked like a figure, hunched over. My heart was pounding now, and I was ready to bolt, but she grabbed my arm, urging me to stay. We both whispered, unsure if we should call out or just back away. But before we could decide, the figure turned, and we were met with a pair of hollow eyes staring right at us. I don't even know how to describe the expression. It was almost like it was surprised to see us. Whatever it wasn't human. Panic surged through me, and I yanked her back, and we stumbled down the hallway, our footsteps echoing in the silence. We rushed down the stairs and burst through the front door, gasping for air. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. Once inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it, breathing heavily. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. We didn't say a word as I started the engine and sped away from that house, the haunting feeling still clinging to me. We never spoke about it after that night. I deleted her number and unmatched her on Tinder. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that house and that figure. I wonder if anyone else has had the same experience, or if we were just two kids who let our imaginations run wild in the dark. But deep down, I know what I saw, and I can't shake the feeling that it was waiting for us to come back. I came across a profile that caught my eye. The guy was cute in a rugged way, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. His bio was simple but intriguing, mentioning his love for hiking and exploring abandoned places. I was always down for an adventure, so I swiped right. A match. I felt a flutter of excitement, but it quickly faded when I noticed he had no other pictures and a very vague bio. I thought it was a little odd, but I was curious. We started chatting, and he seemed charming enough. He loved the idea of exploring the old abandoned amusement park just outside of town, and I couldn't resist. The thrill of being in a creepy place with someone new was just too tempting. We set a date for Saturday night. I spent way too long picking out my outfit, wanting to look cute but not too effortful. I settled on a comfy flannel shirt and jeans. It was chilly that evening, a perfect setting for the adventure we were about to have. I drove to the meeting point, a rundown diner that had seen better days. When I arrived, my heart sank a little. He was already sitting in a booth by the window, and I didn't recognize him at first. He looked different from his pictures, which made my stomach twist. His hair was messier, and his eyes didn't have the same spark. I could feel a twinge of doubt creeping in, but I pushed it aside. I was already here. It would be rude to just leave. We ordered some food, but the conversation felt forced. It was awkward, and I could sense something was off. He kept glancing out the window as if he was waiting for someone. I tried to engage him, but he seemed distant, almost distracted. Finally, he suggested we head out to the amusement park. I agreed, but my gut was starting to twist with unease. The drive to the park was silent, filled with an uncomfortable tension. The park was a short drive from the diner, and as we pulled into the overgrown parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a bad idea. The entrance was shrouded in darkness, the old gates hanging off their hinges. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. He parked the car, and we stepped out into the eerie silence. The moonlight cast long shadows across the ground, and I could hear the rustling of leaves in the wind. We made our way through the broken gate. The air felt thick with anticipation, and I couldn't help but feel like we were stepping into a ghost story. As we walked deeper into the park, I started to notice the remnants of a once thriving place. The rusted rides loomed overhead, their twisted metal reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the creeping fear. I wanted to be brave, to embrace the adventure. He led the way, and I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. We ventured towards the old funhouse, its cracked mirrors reflecting distorted images of ourselves. I hesitated at the entrance, but he encouraged me to go inside. The moment I stepped in, a chill washed over me, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Inside, the mirrors warped our reflections, making it hard to tell where he was standing. I felt a rush of anxiety as the shadows seemed to close in around me. I could hear him moving behind me, but the echo of his footsteps felt off, like there was something else lurking in the corners of the funhouse. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, like a voice calling from the depths of the darkness. I whipped around, but he was still behind me, looking just as startled as I was. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as just my imagination, but I could tell he felt it too. The tension in the air thickened, and I knew it wasn't just my imagination running wild. We continued through the funhouse, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I felt my heart race, and that's when I noticed something strange. He was moving further away from me, as if he didn't want to be too close. I called out to him, but my voice sounded muffled, as if the walls were absorbing my words. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw a shadow dart across the far wall. Panic surged through me, and I rushed to catch up with him. I grabbed his arm, and he looked at me with wide eyes, his previous charm replaced by something unrecognizable. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we sprinted out of the funhouse, into the cold night air. Outside, I was gasping for breath. I turned to him, desperate for an explanation, but his face was pale, and he was staring back at the funhouse as if he saw something I couldn't. I followed his gaze, and that's when I noticed it. A figure standing at the entrance, shrouded in darkness, watching us. My heart dropped. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. I urged him to get in the car, but he hesitated, his eyes locked on the figure. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. I insisted, and finally, he turned, and we both ran to the car. Once inside, I locked the doors, my hands trembling. I glanced back at the funhouse, but the figure was gone. I wanted to scream, to cry, but instead, I just sat there in silence, my heart racing. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. I could see the fear etched on his face, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't just acting weird. He was genuinely terrified. We sat in silence for what felt like forever, the weight of the night pressing down on us. I finally broke the silence, asking if he saw that figure too. He nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. He told me he'd been coming to that park for years, always alone, and he had seen things that didn't make sense. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. We needed to get out of there. I started the car and drove away, the old amusement park fading into the distance, but the feeling of dread didn't leave me. As we left the park behind, I glanced over at him, trying to make sense of the night. He looked just as shaken as I felt. We didn't talk much on the drive back, the weight of the unknown hanging between us. What had we just stumbled upon? When we reached the diner, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I got out of the car, my legs feeling weak. I said goodbye, not knowing if I'd ever see him again. As I walked away, I glanced back one last time, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing in the shadows, watching me. I froze, my heart racing again, and then I turned and hurried away. That night, I learned that some adventures are best left unexplored, and some figures are better left in the shadows. I deleted Tinder the next day, realizing that not every match is meant to be a good one. I had just moved to a new city and was looking to meet some people. My friends kept telling me about Tinder, so I thought, why not? I set up my profile, swiped through a few faces, and matched with a guy named Jake. He looked cute in his profile pictures, but his bio was a bit vague. Something about loving adventure and the outdoors. I figured it was worth a shot, so I messaged him. We started chatting, and he seemed really cool, telling me about his favorite hiking spots and how he loved exploring abandoned places. I was intrigued. It sounded exciting. There was a certain thrill hearing about those hidden gems that most people didn't know about. Eventually, he suggested we meet up at this old, supposedly haunted cabin in the woods. At first, I hesitated. Haunted? That sounded like a horror movie waiting to happen. But the adventurous side of me kicked in, and I agreed. I thought it would be a fun story to tell later, even if it went south. We agreed to meet on a Friday evening. I packed a small bag with snacks and a flashlight, just in case things got weird. As the sun began to set, I made my way to the spot Jake described. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by tall trees that stood like sentinels. Once I arrived, I felt a bit uneasy. The air was thick with an unsettling silence that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I waited for what felt like ages, glancing at my phone every few minutes, hoping he wasn't going to ghost me. Finally, I saw a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Jake appeared, looking just like his pictures, but there was something off about him. Maybe it was the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He greeted me with an enthusiasm that felt forced, but I brushed it off. We made our way to the cabin, and as we stepped inside, I noticed how creaky the floorboards were. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, and the air smelled of mold and decay. The walls were lined with old, peeling wallpaper, and the furniture was covered in white sheets that looked like ghosts themselves. Jake suggested we explore the place, and I reluctantly agreed. It felt strange being in a place that was so abandoned, as if the whole world had forgotten about it. As we moved from room to room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I tried to laugh it off, but my heart raced with every creak and crack of the old wood beneath our feet. Jake, on the other hand, seemed totally at ease. He was chatting about local legends and ghost stories, completely dismissing the chill that crept up my spine. Then, he led me to the basement. He had a glint in his eye as he suggested we check it out. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I didn't want to seem like a coward. It's just a basement, I told myself. As we descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the smell of damp earth hit me hard. The basement was dark, with only the light from our flashlights illuminating the space. Old, rusty tools hung from the walls, and piles of old junk lay scattered everywhere. Jake seemed to get more excited as we ventured further in. I, on the other hand, was beginning to feel uncomfortable. There was something about the basement that felt off, like it had a personality all its own. I looked around, trying to distract myself from the gnawing feeling in my gut. Suddenly, Jake pointed to a corner where the light barely reached. "Look over there," he said, moving toward it. I followed, but as he moved deeper into the shadows, I felt a rush of panic. Something didn't feel right. As Jake reached the corner, he began rummaging through a pile of what looked like old clothes. I hesitated, my instinct screaming to get out of there. That's when I heard it, a low, almost inaudible whisper that sent chills down my spine. I turned, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then I heard it again, clearer this time, like someone was right behind me. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just the shadows lurking in the corners. I called out to Jake, but he didn't respond. I took a step back, my heart racing. The whispering seemed to grow louder, echoing off the walls. I could feel the weight of something unseen pressing down on me, and I knew I had to get out of there. I turned to leave, but as I did, I saw Jake standing frozen in place, staring at something in the darkness. He looked different, his expression twisted with a mix of awe and fear. I called his name again, but he didn't move. Panic surged through me as I realized he was completely entranced. I grabbed his arm, yanking him back, and that seemed to snap him out of it. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice shaky. I didn't answer. I just turned and bolted back up the stairs, pulling him with me. Once we were outside, the air felt different, thicker, charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Jake was still looking at the basement door, almost as if he wanted to go back. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. What the hell was that? I demanded, my voice shaking. He shrugged, still fixated on the cabin, but I could see a flicker of fear in his eyes. We decided to leave, but as we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us out. It was like an invisible weight clung to my back, and every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see something lurking in the shadows. I kept thinking about the whispers and what Jake had seen. What had he been looking at? I wanted to ask him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we walked in silence, the only sound being the crunch of twigs beneath our feet. When we finally reached the car, I felt a sense of relief. I was ready to leave that place behind, but the unease stayed with me. As we drove away, I glanced at Jake, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. I wanted to talk about what had happened, to process it, but he seemed distant, almost like he was somewhere else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. Images of the cabin flashed through my mind, and the whispers echoed in my ears. I kept checking my phone, thinking about how I could tell my friends the crazy story, but something held me back. The next day, I tried texting Jake, but he didn't respond. I thought maybe he was just busy, but days turned into weeks, and I never heard from him again. I eventually deleted the app, telling myself I'd find friends the old-fashioned way. But deep down, I felt like I'd escaped something sinister. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Jake had seen in that basement had latched onto him. The whispers had haunted me for weeks, and even now, I sometimes hear them when the wind howls through the trees outside my window. It's been a while since I thought about Tinder, but every now and then, I wonder if Jake ever found his way back to that cabin, or if he's still lost in the shadows. I never thought downloading a dating app would lead me down such a twisted path. It all started on a boring Friday night. My friends were all busy with their own plans, and I was stuck at home scrolling through Instagram, feeling a little left out. That's when I got the idea to download Tinder. A couple of swipes later, I stumbled across a guy named Jake. He looked cute, with messy dark hair and a killer smile. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily. There was something about him that felt different, almost magnetic. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a quaint little coffee shop on the outskirts of town. It had that vintage vibe, with mismatched furniture and a collection of old vinyl records lining the walls. I was excited but also a little nervous. You hear stories about people getting catfished or worse, but I brushed those thoughts aside. I mean, Jake seemed genuine enough, right? The day finally arrived. As I walked into the coffee shop, the bell above the door chimed, and my heart raced. I spotted him immediately, sitting at a table in the corner, a steaming cup in front of him. He waved, and I felt a rush of relief. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even better in person. We chatted over coffee, laughing and sharing stories. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was dark outside. Jake suggested we take a walk through a nearby park. I thought it sounded romantic, so I agreed. The park was mostly empty, illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. We walked side by side, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Then, out of nowhere, Jake suggested we check out an old abandoned house at the edge of the park. At first, I hesitated. The house looked creepy, with broken windows and overgrown weeds. But Jake's excitement was infectious. He said it would be an adventure, and I found myself wanting to impress him. So, with a mix of curiosity and adrenaline, I followed him as he led the way. As we approached the house, I felt a chill in the air. The door creaked open, almost inviting us in. Jake seemed unfazed, stepping inside without a second thought. I hesitated, but he beckoned me, and I couldn't let him go in alone. The interior was dark and dusty, the air thick with the smell of mildew. Moonlight streamed through the cracked windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. We explored the first floor, and I could feel my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. It felt like something out of a horror movie. Jake found an old flashlight in a drawer, and we ventured upstairs. Each step creaked ominously beneath our feet. The second floor was even darker, the air colder. It felt like we were being watched, but I dismissed it as my imagination getting the best of me. That's when I noticed something strange. There were old photographs hanging on the walls, but they weren't just random pictures. They were unsettling, portraits of people with haunting expressions, their eyes seeming to follow us as we moved. I felt a chill run down my spine. Jake laughed it off, saying it added to the thrill of being in a haunted house. We made our way to a small, dimly lit room at the end of the hallway. It was filled with broken furniture and scattered debris. In the corner stood an old mirror, its surface cracked and dusty. Jake approached it, peering into the glass. I stood back, feeling uneasy. There was something off about that mirror, something that made me want to look away. But curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped closer. As I looked into the mirror, I didn't see my reflection. Instead, I saw a dark figure standing behind me. My heart dropped, and I spun around, but there was nothing there. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but I could feel Jake's gaze on me, and it made me uneasy. We left the room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The air was thick with tension, and every creak of the house made my skin crawl. Jake seemed oblivious, his excitement still palpable. He suggested we head back downstairs, but I hesitated. Something was off about him. As we made our way back, I noticed he was acting a little different. He was quieter, almost too focused on the shadows around us. It felt like he was searching for something, and I suddenly felt like I was in over my head. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to check the time, but the screen was dead. I cursed under my breath, wishing I had charged it before coming here. Jake turned to me, a strange smile creeping across his face. He suggested we take one more look around before leaving. I wanted to say no, to get out of this creepy house, but his enthusiasm was hard to resist. I followed him, albeit hesitantly, as he led me to the back of the house. We stepped into a small room that felt even colder than the rest of the house. There was a single window, boarded up and covered in grime. The air was thick, making it hard to breathe. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to leave, but Jake was standing at the window, peering out into the darkness. I approached him, but something in the way he was standing sent alarm bells ringing in my head. His body was tense, and his eyes seemed fixated on something in the distance. I called out to him, but it was like he didn't hear me. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized how isolated we were. Then I heard it, a faint whispering. It was coming from the walls, like a chorus of voices trying to tell me something. I felt a wave of panic hit me, and I grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him away from the window. He finally turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that scared me. It was hunger, a kind of hunger I couldn't understand. I didn't say a word as I backed away, but I could feel the walls closing in on me. I needed to get out. I turned to leave, but Jake grabbed my wrist, his grip tightening. I looked up at him in shock, trying to understand what was happening. His expression was no longer playful. It was cold and predatory. I yanked my arm away and bolted for the stairs, my heart racing. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps echoing through the empty house. I reached the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it was locked from the outside. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the door, desperation filling my voice. In the distance, I could hear him laughing, dark and sinister. I turned around, ready to confront him, but he was gone. The house felt alive, twisting and turning as if it were trying to trap me inside. I darted for the back door, praying that it would open. It swung wide, and I stumbled out into the night. I ran through the park, not daring to look back. The moonlight illuminated my path, but I could still feel his presence lurking behind me. I finally reached the edge of the park, my lungs burning and my heart pounding. I didn't stop until I reached the street, where the bright lights made me feel safe again. As I looked back, the house loomed in the distance, dark and foreboding. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was still inside, waiting for his next victim. I never matched with him again, and I deleted Tinder the moment I got home. I've told this story to friends, but they always laugh it off, thinking it's just a wild tale. But I know what I felt that night, and I'll never forget the darkness that lurked in that abandoned house. Swiping through Tinder one quiet night in my apartment, nursing a half-empty bottle of cheap wine and feeling a bit lonely. I had swiped left on countless profiles, my mind racing with thoughts about the kind of guy I wanted to meet. My friends always raved about the thrill of the app, but I had only come across weirdos and misfits. It was the typical, let's grab a drink, messages that never went anywhere. But that night, something felt different. As I flicked my thumb across the screen, I stumbled upon a profile that caught my eye. His pictures were all incredibly polished, like he had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. A smirk played on his lips, and his eyes had this intense, almost magnetic quality that made me pause. His bio was short and intriguing. He wrote that he was looking for adventure and loved the thrill of the unknown. I swiped right without thinking twice. Within minutes, we matched. His name was Alex, and we chatted easily, our conversation flowing like we had known each other for ages. He was funny, charming, and the kind of guy who knew how to keep things interesting. He suggested we meet up that weekend. I hesitated for a moment, but the adrenaline rush of finally getting to meet someone who seemed genuinely cool pushed me to agree. We decided to meet at a dive bar on the outskirts of town, a place I had heard of but never been to. It had that classic gritty vibe, with dim lighting and music that felt like it belonged to a different era. I arrived first, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. As I waited, I scanned the room, taking in the unusual decor and the eclectic crowd. There was an aura of mystery hanging in the air, but I brushed it off as part of the bar's charm. When Alex finally walked in, he looked even better in person. He had a confident stride, and his smile lit up the dim space. We grabbed a corner booth and started talking over drinks. The chemistry was palpable, and for a while, everything felt perfect. But then, as the night wore on, I noticed something strange about him. His stories, while captivating, seemed to have this underlying darkness. He spoke casually about adventures that involved risky behavior and encounters that felt far too extreme for my taste. As the clock struck midnight, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He mentioned wanting to take me somewhere special, somewhere that would truly be an adventure. My heart raced at the thought, but a tiny voice in the back of my head urged me to be cautious. This guy was charming, but there was something unsettling about his intensity. Against better judgment, I found myself agreeing. We left the bar together, and he led me to his car, a sleek black sedan that looked like it belonged to someone with a bit too much money. The drive was filled with nervous laughter, and I tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. He took back roads, weaving through unfamiliar streets, and I felt the thrill of the unknown creep in. Eventually, we arrived at an old, abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It looked like it had been there forever, with cracked windows and graffiti plastered across the walls. The moon illuminated the place, casting an eerie glow that sent chills down my spine. I wondered if this was really a good idea, but curiosity got the better of me. Alex parked the car and jumped out, his enthusiasm infectious. I hesitated, but eventually followed him inside. The moment I stepped through the threshold, I felt the air grow colder. The inside of the warehouse was massive, filled with shadows and the faint smell of mildew. My heart pounded as Alex led the way into the darkness, his figure illuminated sporadically by the moonlight streaming through the broken windows. He pulled out his phone and turned on a flashlight, guiding us deeper into the building. I tried to shake off the unease creeping into my mind, focusing instead on the adventure we were supposedly having. He kept talking about how this place was once a hub for underground music and art, and I found myself getting swept up in his enthusiasm. But then, I noticed something odd. There were old photographs tacked to the walls, images of people I didn't recognize, their faces twisted in expressions of fear and despair. I pointed them out to Alex, trying to keep my tone light, but he just shrugged and said they were part of the allure. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I pushed it aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. As we wandered deeper, I began to feel a growing sense of dread. The warehouse was a maze of corridors, and I lost track of how long we had been walking. The flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I was enveloped in darkness. I felt my heart race, a primal instinct screaming at me to turn back. But Alex seemed unfazed, laughing as if the shadows were just part of the fun. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the vast space. It sent a jolt of fear coursing through me. I looked at Alex, who was now standing still, his expression shifting from amusement to something more serious. He turned to me and said he should show me something cool. Against my better judgment, I followed him further into the depths of the warehouse. We reached a large, open room that felt even colder. The walls were covered in strange symbols and writings that looked ancient. The flashlight caught something glinting on the floor, and I bent down to see what it was. A rusty knife lay there, its blade stained with something dark. My stomach churned, and I realized I wanted to leave now. I turned to Alex, ready to suggest we head back, but he was staring at the symbols on the wall, almost mesmerized. I called his name, but he didn't respond. Panic set in. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back toward the exit, but he resisted. His eyes were wild, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the guy I had been flirting with earlier. He spoke in a low voice, almost like he was in a trance, talking about the power of the place. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. This wasn't the adventure I signed up for. With adrenaline pumping, I yanked myself free and bolted toward the exit. The shadows closed in around me, and the noise grew louder, a cacophony of whispers that seemed to echo my fear. I stumbled through the dark, desperately trying to find my way back. When I finally reached the entrance, I turned around, expecting to see Alex following me, but he was gone. I looked around, heart racing, and called his name, but the only response was the eerie silence of the warehouse. I bolted outside, gasping for air, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hand shook as I fumbled for the keys, and I jumped in, locking the doors behind me. I glanced back at the warehouse, half expecting Alex to appear, but all I saw was darkness. I drove home in a daze, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a twisted film. I never did hear from Alex again. Part of me hoped he wouldn't show up on my phone, but another part of me felt a strange sense of unease, a lingering question that haunted me. What really happened in that warehouse? And who was the guy I thought I knew? I still can't believe I'm sharing this story, but here we go. It all started when I was swiping through Tinder one night, bored out of my mind. You know how it is. A couple of dull matches, some cringy pickup lines, and then there's this one profile that catches my eye. His name was Jake. He looked like your typical bro. Charming smile, a few travel pics, and a bio that promised adventure. I swiped right without a second thought. We matched almost instantly, and his enthusiasm was contagious. We started chatting, and he seemed genuinely interested. He asked about my hobbies, favorite movies, and I don't know, just normal stuff. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. I was a bit hesitant at first. My friends always warned me about meeting people online, but he seemed legit. I figured it was just a casual coffee date. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, a place I frequented and felt comfortable in. The day of the date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I dressed casually but cute, hoping to make a good impression. I got to the cafe early, ordered a latte, and found a cozy corner table where I could sit and watch the door. Time passed, and I was starting to wonder if he was going to show when, finally, I spotted him walking in. Jake was even more attractive in person. He had a confident stride, and that same charming smile that had drawn me in initially. We exchanged pleasantries and immediately fell into easy conversation. It felt natural, as if we had known each other for ages. As we talked, I noticed he had a slight edge to him, a hint of something dark lurking behind those charming eyes. But I shrugged it off. Everyone has their quirks, right? After a while, he suggested we take a walk around the park nearby. I thought it was a great idea. The weather was perfect, and I was enjoying his company. We wandered through the trees, chatting about everything and nothing, when he suddenly veered off the path and headed toward a dimly lit area. I hesitated but followed him, curious. We ended up at a secluded bench, surrounded by dense foliage. It felt eerie, almost like we had entered another world. The sounds of the city faded, and it was just us. Jake leaned in closer, and I could see the intensity in his gaze. He started talking about how he loved exploring hidden spots in the city, places most people would never find. I was intrigued, until he started mentioning some darker interests, true crime podcasts, urban legends, and even some of the more gruesome aspects of history. At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was just trying to impress me. But as he spoke, I noticed his expression shift, the way his eyes lit up at the mention of something sinister. It was unsettling, to say the least. I tried to steer the conversation back to safer topics, but he kept circling back to his fascination with the macabre. I felt a chill creeping up my spine, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe he was just passionate about his interests. After a while, I decided it was time to head back. I suggested we walk back to the cafe, but he insisted we take a different route. Something in his tone made me hesitate, but I didn't want to be rude. So, I followed him deeper into the park. The trees grew thicker, and the path became less defined. The air felt heavier, and I could sense my heart rate increasing. Eventually, we reached an old, abandoned building at the far end of the park. It looked like it had been there for decades, overtaken by vines and surrounded by a rickety fence. Jake looked at me with a grin that didn't quite sit right. He said it was one of his favorite spots, a place where he could let his imagination run wild. I was about to object when he grabbed my hand and pulled me closer to the entrance. I felt a surge of panic, but I didn't want to seem scared. I kept telling myself it was just a building. But as we stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air was stale, and the light was dim. Shadows danced on the walls, and the floor creaked beneath our feet. I felt trapped. Jake seemed unfazed, moving further inside as if he owned the place. I tried to keep up, but my instincts were screaming at me to get out. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. I asked Jake if we could leave, but he just laughed and said we were just getting started. He led me into what looked like an old living room, the furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. There were strange symbols carved into the walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we shouldn't be there. Jake pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, laughing as he posed dramatically. I stood there, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I wanted to tell him to stop, to leave, but the words wouldn't come out. It was as if the walls were closing in on me. After a few moments, he turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. He said he wanted to show me something. The way he said it sent chills down my spine. I hesitated, but there was a part of me that was too curious to back out now. I followed him further into the building, my heart pounding in my chest. We went down a narrow hallway that led to a darkened room. The air felt colder, and I could barely see anything. Jake flicked on the flashlight from his phone, illuminating a wall covered in old newspaper clippings and photographs. My stomach dropped as I scanned the articles: missing persons, unsolved murders, eerie disappearances. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jake was grinning, clearly excited by my reaction. He began to ramble about how he loved collecting stories of the lost, how he believed they were all connected in some twisted way. I could barely listen as panic set in. I felt trapped and wanted nothing more than to get out of that creepy building. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to leave. Jake noticed and stepped closer, his demeanor shifting. He was no longer the charming guy I had met in the cafe. He looked almost predatory now, eyes glittering with a manic intensity. It was as if the darkness of the building had seeped into him. In that moment, I realized I had to escape. I turned and bolted down the hallway, adrenaline surging through me. I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't stop. I burst through the front door and into the open air, sprinting away from the building, my heart racing. I didn't look back until I reached the main road, panting and terrified. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I called an Uber. I couldn't believe how close I had come to something terrible. I made a promise to myself. I'd never swipe right without doing my homework again. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me, the way he had looked when he talked about the lost. It was a reminder that sometimes the charming facade hides something far darker. I deleted Tinder that night, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever go back. You know how it is. Boredom sets in, and you start swiping left and right like it's some kind of mindless game. I wasn't particularly looking for anything serious, just some casual chats and maybe a fun night out. My friends always told me to be cautious, but I figured what could go wrong? People meet online all the time, right? So, I found myself matched with this girl named Sarah. Her pictures were cute, and she seemed chill. We started chatting, and it was all good vibes. She had this mischievous sense of humor that drew me in. After a few days of texting back and forth, Sarah suggested we meet up for a drink at a local bar. The place had a relaxed vibe, dimly lit with a mix of indie music playing in the background. I arrived a bit early, nerves buzzing in my stomach. When she finally walked in, I felt a rush of excitement. She was even prettier in person. We hit it off instantly, laughing and sharing stories about our lives. It felt easy, natural, like we had known each other for ages. After a few drinks, she suggested we go to her apartment nearby. I thought it was a bit sudden, but the chemistry was undeniable. I agreed, and we walked to her place, chatting about everything and nothing. The night felt electric, the anticipation thick in the air. Sarah lived in an older building that had a certain charm about it, creaky wooden floors and vintage wallpaper that told stories of the past. Once inside, she poured us both another drink and turned on some music. I remember the way the soft light flickered as we talked about our favorite bands, sharing laughs and stolen glances. Everything was perfect until she suddenly went quiet. I looked over, and she was staring at something behind me with wide eyes. I turned around, but there was nothing there. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just her being dramatic, but the mood shifted. She seemed a bit off after that, like she was somewhere else entirely. I tried to lighten the mood, but it was like I was talking to a wall. Finally, she excused herself to the bathroom, and I took that moment to look around. Her apartment was cozy but had this eerie feeling, like I was being watched. I shook it off, chalking it up to my imagination. When Sarah returned, she seemed more anxious. She kept glancing at the window, and I could see the tension in her body. I asked if she was okay, but she only smiled weakly and said she was just tired. I didn't buy it, but I figured maybe she just had a long day. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere grew heavier, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Then, without any warning, there was a loud knock on the door. My heart jumped. Sarah froze, her eyes wide as she glanced at me, panic etched on her face. I stood up, almost instinctively moving toward the door. She grabbed my arm, pulling me back. I could feel her pulse racing beneath my fingertips. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I whispered to her, asking if she knew who it was. She shook her head, her face pale. Fear gripped me. This was not how I thought the night would go. I wanted to leave, but curiosity got the better of me. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole, but all I could see was darkness. The hallway was dimly lit, and I couldn't make out a single figure. Sarah was begging me not to open the door, her voice trembling. I tried to reassure her, but I was just as scared. I stepped back, trying to process what was happening. The knocking turned into banging, and I felt the walls shudder with each hit. I could practically feel my heart in my throat. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the banging stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned back to Sarah, who was now sitting on the couch, trembling. I went to her, trying to comfort her, but she was in another world, her eyes darting around the room like she was hearing something I couldn't. I felt like I was trapped in a horror movie, and there was no escape. I wanted to call for help, but my phone was dead. I was left with the creeping dread that something was very wrong, and I was stuck in this apartment with a girl I barely knew. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a soft sound outside the door, a whisper that sent chills down my spine. It was like someone was calling for help, but there was something off about it. I looked at Sarah, who was now wide-eyed and shaking her head violently. I could see the fear etched across her face. Whatever was happening, she knew more than she was letting on. I took a step toward the door, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear. Before I could reach the knob, the door rattled violently, as if someone was trying to force it open. Sarah screamed, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a prank or some random occurrence. Someone was out there, and they were coming for us. We backed away, moving to the far side of the room, completely frozen in fear. The banging resumed, louder and more ferocious. I could see the door shaking, the wood creaking under the pressure. I quickly scanned the room for anything that could help us defend ourselves. The vibe shifted from casual to life or death in a matter of moments. We needed to escape, but the only way out was through that door. I looked at Sarah, trying to gauge her thoughts. She was trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered something about needing to hide. I glanced around and spotted a closet in the corner. It was a small, cramped space, but it was the only option we had. I grabbed her hand, and we rushed to the closet, squeezing ourselves inside. The darkness enveloped us, and I could hear her breathing heavily, each gasp echoing in the small space. The banging continued, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of the door splintering. My heart raced. I felt like I was going to pass out from sheer terror. As we sat there, pressed against each other in the tiny closet, I could hear footsteps entering the apartment. They were heavy, deliberate, and echoing through the silence. I could feel Sarah's heartbeat against my chest, a frantic rhythm matching my own. The footsteps moved closer, and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find us. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the footsteps stopped. I could hear soft murmurs, low and menacing. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent chills down my spine. I wanted to scream, to shout that we were in here, but I knew it would only make things worse. Time felt like it stood still as we waited in that closet, fear paralyzing me. I don't know how long we were there, but it felt like hours. Finally, I heard the footsteps retreat, and the apartment went quiet again. I slowly opened the closet door, peeking out to see if the coast was clear. The living room was empty, but the door was wide open, swinging slightly on its hinges. I looked at Sarah, who was still shaking, and I knew we had to get out of there. We crept toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. As I reached the threshold, I glanced back, half expecting someone to jump out at us. We bolted down the hallway, not stopping until we reached the stairs. I could hear the faint echo of footsteps behind us, but I didn't dare look back. We rushed outside into the cool night air, gasping for breath. I didn't stop running until we were far away from that building, my mind racing with questions and disbelief. Later, as I sat in my car, staring blankly at the streetlights, I couldn't help but wonder about Sarah. Was she in on it? Did she know who was after us? All I knew was that I'd never swipe on Tinder again. The thrill of meeting someone new had turned into a nightmare, and the shadows of that night would haunt me forever. I was scrolling through Tinder one night, just killing time. Like, what else do you do when you're bored at 2 a.m.? I was swiping left and right, half-heartedly looking for someone to chat with, when I came across a profile that caught my eye. Her name was Emily, and her pictures were stunning. She had this bright smile and long dark hair that fell just right over her shoulders. The bio was simple, too. Something about loving horror movies and late-night hikes. I thought, hey, she seems cool. I swiped right without much thought, and a match popped up almost instantly. We started chatting, and I was surprised at how easy it was. We clicked right away, sharing our favorite horror flicks and discussing how the jump scares always got us. It felt like we were on the same wavelength, and I couldn't help but feel excited. The conversation flowed naturally, and before I knew it, we were talking about meeting up. Emily suggested a local haunted house attraction. It seemed like the perfect idea. I figured it would be a fun way to get to know her while indulging in our shared love for all things spooky. The night of our date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. I met her at the entrance of the haunted house, and she looked even better in person. We exchanged awkward smiles and laughs, and then we headed inside. The atmosphere was electric with screams and laughter echoing through the dimly lit corridors. I felt a thrill coursing through me. It was exhilarating. As we wandered through the haunted house, I noticed something odd. There was this one particular section that seemed to have no one in it. Just a long, dark hallway with flickering lights. Most people were too busy screaming and running through the other rooms. But Emily wanted to check it out. I hesitated, but she pulled me along, her excitement infectious. We stepped into the hallway, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. The lights flickered more intensely, and I could hear a faint whispering echoing off the walls. It was so quiet compared to the chaos outside. Emily didn't seem to notice. She was too busy laughing and making jokes about the creepy decor. But I felt something was off. It was like we had stepped into another world, one that didn't belong to the haunted house at all. As we walked deeper into the hallway, the air grew colder, and the whispering turned into soft giggles. I looked at Emily, thinking maybe she was just messing with me. But her expression changed. She was no longer smiling. Her eyes darted around as if she sensed something I couldn't. I wanted to suggest we turn back, but before I could say anything, the lights flickered one last time and then went out completely. Panic surged through me. I grabbed Emily's hand, and we stood there in complete darkness. I could hear my heartbeat thumping in my ears. I squeezed her hand tighter, trying to keep calm. I could feel her trembling, and suddenly, the whispering returned, this time much louder, almost like it was coming from all around us. It felt like we were being watched. Just as I was about to suggest we leave, I heard a loud crash behind us. The sound echoed through the hallway, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. Emily and I turned to run, but the darkness seemed to wrap around us, making it hard to see. I tripped over something, falling hard against the ground. Emily stumbled back, and I heard her gasp. I looked up, and in the dim light filtering through, I saw her face pale and terrified. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed her again, urging her to follow me. We raced back the way we came, the whispers growing louder and more chaotic. It felt like something was chasing us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. We finally burst out into the main area of the haunted house, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The sounds of laughter and screams washed over us like a warm blanket. But when I looked at Emily, something was off. Her eyes were wide, and she was staring at something behind me. I turned around, and there was nothing there, just the usual haunted house decorations. I tried to joke about how intense that was, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the haunted house, insisting we leave. I didn't argue. I was just as freaked out as she was. We got into my car, and I could feel the tension in the air. I wanted to lighten things up, maybe suggest grabbing a bite to eat. But I could see she was still shaken. As I started to drive, she suddenly said she needed to go home. I wanted to know if she was okay, but she seemed distant, lost in her thoughts. I dropped her off at her place, and as she got out of the car, she turned back and said something that sent chills down my spine. She told me she had a great time, but she felt like she needed to go home alone. I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't press her. I watched as she walked into her house, and that's when I noticed it. A shadow moved behind her, just for a split second. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just my imagination. I drove home, the unease settling in my stomach like a heavy stone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us out of that haunted house. I tried to brush it off as a weird night, but deep down, I knew that the experience had been more than just a fun time. Over the next few days, I tried to reach out to Emily, but she didn't respond. It was like she had vanished. I checked her Instagram and saw she hadn't posted anything since our date. I thought maybe she was just spooked and needed some time. But a week passed, and I started to worry. Then one night, I received a message from a random number. It was a photo of Emily, but the image was unsettling. It looked like she was in her bedroom, and there were strange symbols drawn on the walls. The caption simply read, "She's not alone anymore." I felt my stomach drop. I tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I panicked, wondering if I should go check on her, but something stopped me. It was as if that dark hallway had left a mark on me too. Days turned into weeks, and I never saw her again. I tried to convince myself it was all just a bad dream, but every time I closed my eyes, I could hear those whispers. Eventually, I deleted Tinder, thinking I needed to distance myself from that world. But the memories lingered, and I often found myself thinking about Emily and that haunted house, that dark hallway where we lost ourselves. Every so often, I still get a notification from Tinder, and each time, I can't help but feel a chill run down my spine. I wonder if I'll ever see Emily again, or if she truly is lost in whatever darkness we stumbled into that night. Just another boring Friday night, swiping left on the usual parade of selfies and gym pics when something caught my eye. Her name was Mia. Her profile was simple, just a couple of cute photos and a bio that said she loved hiking and horror movies. I was instantly intrigued. The last girl I dated was more into brunch spots and yoga classes, so the idea of someone who shared my taste for the macabre was enticing. After a few swipes, we matched. Excited, I sent her a message, and to my surprise, she replied almost instantly. We hit it off, sharing our favorite scary movies and swapping stories about the creepiest places we'd ever visited. Before long, we decided to meet up. She suggested a local park that had a reputation for being haunted. Perfect, I thought. What could be more fun than a little ghost hunting on a first date? The day of our meetup arrived, and I was nervous but excited. I arrived early, pacing the park, taking in the fading sunlight that bathed the trees in an orange glow. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, but there was something off about the place. I brushed it off as nerves and waited. When Mia finally showed up, she looked even better than her pictures. We exchanged awkward hellos and set off down a dirt path lined with towering trees. As we walked, Mia shared the legend of the park. Apparently, it was home to the ghost of a young woman who had vanished decades ago while hiking. Some said she was still searching for a lost love, while others claimed she was trapped there, forever wandering the woods. Mia spoke with such passion that it sent chills down my spine. I thought it was just her storytelling skills, but as the sun dipped lower, casting eerie shadows, I started feeling uneasy. We reached a clearing with an old, abandoned cabin. I didn't remember reading about it in any of the legends, but it was too tempting to pass up. Mia suggested we check it out. I hesitated, feeling a knot form in my stomach, but the adventurous side of me won out. We approached the cabin, and as we stepped inside, the air turned cold. Dust motes danced in the fading light, and the floor creaked ominously beneath our feet. Mia pulled out her phone to take a picture, and as she did, I noticed something strange on the walls. Strange marks, almost like scratches, as if something had tried to claw its way out. I pointed them out to Mia, and she laughed it off, saying it was probably just a raccoon or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. We decided to explore the upstairs, and as we climbed the rickety staircase, it felt as if the air thickened around us. The top floor was even dustier, with old furniture covered in sheets. Mia took more pictures, and I stood by the window, looking out at the darkening woods. That's when I noticed something, a figure standing between the trees. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but as I squinted, I could see it was a woman. She was dressed in a flowing white dress, her hair long and disheveled. I turned to Mia to tell her, but she was engrossed in her phone, oblivious to the figure outside. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. I wanted to leave, but something kept me rooted in place. The woman in the woods was staring directly at me, her face pale and haunting. I could feel my heart racing, and I finally managed to get Mia's attention. I pointed out the window, but when she looked, the figure was gone. Just a trick of the light, she said, rolling her eyes. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We decided to head back downstairs, and as we did, I heard a soft whisper. It was faint but distinctly a voice. I froze, and Mia, noticing my sudden stillness, asked what was wrong. I told her I thought I heard something, and she laughed again, saying it was just the wind. As we stepped outside, the sun had fully set, and the woods were cloaked in darkness. I pulled out my phone to check the time, and to my surprise, the screen was flickering. It was acting strangely, turning on and off, and I could feel my anxiety rising. I glanced at Mia, who seemed to be completely unfazed by the eerie atmosphere. We made our way back down the trail, but I could have sworn I heard footsteps behind us. Every time I turned around, there was nothing, just darkness and the rustling of leaves. I quickened my pace, and Mia noticed. She asked if I was okay, and I forced a smile, saying I was just excited to get back to the car. As we reached the edge of the park, I felt a sudden rush of relief. But as I turned to Mia to suggest we grab some food, I noticed her expression had changed. Her eyes were wide, staring past me into the trees. I turned around, expecting to see whatever had been following us, but there was nothing there. "Mia, what's wrong?" I asked. She didn't respond. Instead, she slowly walked toward the darkness, almost as if in a trance. Panic surged through me as I grabbed her arm, but she just shook her head and continued walking. I had never seen her like this, and it terrified me. I pulled her back, and finally, she snapped out of it. She looked at me, confusion etched on her face. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. We both took a moment to breathe, but the tension hung heavily in the air. We made our way to my car, and as soon as we were inside, I locked the doors. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman from before. But there was nothing, just the empty road stretching out in front of us. I started the engine, and we sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the night pressing down on us. "Do you think we should go back?" Mia finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, telling her I thought we should just head home. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The trees loomed ominously on either side of the road, and I kept glancing in the mirror, expecting to see that ghostly figure again. After dropping Mia off, I headed home, but sleep wouldn't come. Every creak in the house made me jump, and I kept replaying the night in my head. What had happened to Mia? Why had she walked away like that? I felt like there was something I was missing, some connection that had slipped through my fingers. The next day, I received a message from Mia. She said she had a weird dream about the park and wanted to talk. I met her at a coffee shop, and as she recounted her dream, a chill ran down my spine. She described the same woman I had seen, the same whispers I had heard. We both realized we had stumbled into something we shouldn't have. The park, the cabin, the woman, it was all connected. We vowed never to go back, but every once in a while, I still find myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see her standing there, watching us. I had always seen Tinder as a casual way to meet new people. Swiping left when I wasn't interested, swiping right when I was, and hoping for a good conversation or maybe a cute date. I never thought it would lead me to a night that would haunt me for a long time. It all started on a rainy Friday evening. I was at home, scrolling through my phone, feeling bored and a little lonely. I was swiping through profiles when I came across this guy named Eric. He had a charming smile, a few travel photos that looked like they were taken in some exotic locations, and a bio that was witty without trying too hard. It felt like a good fit, so I swiped right. To my surprise, we matched within seconds. We started chatting and hit it off right away. Eric was easy to talk to, and his sense of humor was on point. After an hour of messaging, he asked if I wanted to meet up. It was last minute, but I figured why not? I hadn't had a good date in ages, and he seemed normal enough. We settled on a coffee shop downtown, one that stayed open late. When I arrived, I was a little nervous but excited. The rain had let up, and the streets were glistening under the streetlights. I walked into the cafe, and there he was, sitting at a corner table with a warm smile. He looked even better in person. We chatted over coffee, and it felt like we had known each other for ages. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was closing time. Eric suggested we go for a walk in the nearby park. The idea seemed innocent enough, so I agreed. We wandered through the park, the moonlight illuminating the path. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the air felt fresh and cool. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing at the silly stories we shared. I felt a connection with him, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. As we walked deeper into the park, the atmosphere changed. The laughter faded, and a strange tension hung in the air. I could hear the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of water flowing in a nearby stream. It was peaceful, yet unsettling. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination running wild. Then, out of nowhere, Eric suggested we check out a bridge that was hidden away in the park. He spoke about it as if it were some kind of secret treasure, and I, being intrigued by the mystery, agreed. We walked a bit further until we reached this old, wooden bridge that crossed a narrow stream. The wood creaked beneath our feet, and a chill ran down my spine. There was something eerie about the place, but I tried to shake it off. As we stood on the bridge, I noticed that the moonlight barely reached us. The shadows seemed to stretch, twisting into odd shapes that made me uneasy. Eric leaned against the railing, looking out into the darkness. He started to share a story about a local legend involving the bridge. It was a tale of lost souls and a haunting that supposedly took place every full moon. I thought it was just a spooky story meant to impress me, but as he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping in. Suddenly, his tone changed. He was no longer the charming guy I had been talking to earlier. His eyes seemed to darken, and there was something unsettling in his smile. It felt like he was trying to convey a deeper meaning behind his words, something that made my heart race. I took a step back, feeling the need to escape. Eric noticed my discomfort and laughed it off, trying to lighten the mood again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I suggested we head back, but he insisted we stay just a little longer. I felt trapped, like the shadows around us were closing in. I tried to play it cool and agreed to stay, but my heart was pounding in my chest. As we stood there, the atmosphere grew heavier. The rustling of the leaves turned into whispers, and I could swear I heard voices echoing through the trees. I glanced at Eric, who was now staring into the darkness with an unsettling intensity. It was as if he was in a trance, completely unaware of my growing anxiety. I decided it was time to leave. I began to walk back towards the path we came from, but Eric grabbed my wrist gently, urging me to stay. I looked into his eyes, searching for the warmth I had seen earlier, but all I found was an unsettling emptiness. I pulled away and started walking faster, my instincts screaming at me to get out of there. The sounds in the park seemed to grow louder, the whispers turning into a cacophony that echoed in my ears. I could feel Eric's presence behind me, and I quickened my pace. The shadows danced around me, making it hard to see clearly. I could hear him calling out to me, but I didn't dare look back. My heart raced as I sprinted towards the entrance of the park. Finally, I burst through the gates and onto the street, gasping for breath. I turned to see if he was following me, but the park was silent. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the path ahead, but I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. I finally managed to get in and lock the doors, my heart still racing. I glanced back towards the park, half expecting to see Eric lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something dark. My mind raced with questions. Who was Eric really? What was it about that bridge? I tried to push the thoughts away, focusing on the road ahead, but the feeling of dread lingered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. I couldn't understand how someone could change so quickly, how someone who seemed so normal could suddenly feel so wrong. Weeks passed, and I deleted Tinder from my phone, unable to shake the memory of that night. I told myself it was just a bad date, a weird coincidence, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I would sometimes drive past the park, my heart racing at the sight of it, but I never stopped. The experience left me shaken, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that walk among us, hiding behind a charming smile and an intriguing story. I learned to trust my instincts more, but the shadows of that night always haunted me, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to resurface.